Kansas lawmakers back in session for a few days working on bills that the governor vetoed.
And one of those bills would have brought property tax relief to Kansans, but as Sophia Gernander explains, there might be another path to bring this relief to homeowners.
We've heard a lot about property tax relief this year, but so far no one has agreed on how to deliver it. Now lawmakers are making one last effort to pass property tax relief before the veto session ends.
Kansans have been crystal clear with me that they need property tax relief and they need it now.
Kansas Republicans and Democrats are in agreement about one thing. They want to bring their constituents property tax relief. But one bill that promised to deliver this was vetoed by Governor Kelly.
And what that would have done was created a protest petition process anytime a taxing entity exceeded 3% or the CPI inflation.
One concern we heard from people in Sedgwick County, the bill would have negatively impacted local government's municipal bonds. Senator Owens says they have reworked the bill.
Is a modified version of the same bill, allowing the cities and counties to capture bonding, growth.
Another plan is going through the Kansas Senate. It's supported by the governor.
The first thing that we are looking at doing is providing a $250 vehicle registration tax credit on every single vehicle registered in the state of Kansas.
Again, there's no guarantee yet about which bill will be passed, but lawmakers tell me they are determined to pass some form of property tax relief by the week's end. At the State House, Sophia Gernander, 12 News.
And tomorrow is the final day of the veto session. Lawmakers have until the end of the day Friday to pass one of these bills.